Hey guys, today we're taking a look at a really awesome sci-fi flick called Ex Machina. Be sure to enjoy. Caleb wins first place in a company contest, immediately texting all his friends and family members about it. He receives many congratulatory messages and praise from his coworkers. He gets on a helicopter and makes his way towards his boss's massive estate. He walks the remainder of the path until he reaches a remote but modern home. It's even got a fancy AI-powered security system. Caleb meets with Nathan, his boss. He's quite friendly. Caleb, on the other hand, is very awkward and tense. Nathan picks up on that and tells him to relax. He wants to get past the boss-employer dynamic in favor of a more casual one. Just two bros hanging out. Nathan shows him around the place and explains that his keycard only grants him access to the rooms he's allowed to visit. They both head into Caleb's new room when Nathan shares with him that he'd like to show him the latest research project he's been working on. However, Caleb must first sign a non-disclosure agreement. Caleb is initially hesitant, but ultimately agrees. Nathan asks him if he knows what a Turing test is. He answers correctly. It's a test to see if an AI can fool a human into thinking it's a real person. Caleb proceeds to have his first session with the AI named Ava. He notices a peculiar crack on the glass wall. Ava walks in, immediately drawing Caleb's gaze. They engage in basic small talk while Nathan overlooks on a monitor in a separate room. After the session, Caleb reflects with Nathan on the experience. Initially, Caleb wants to talk about the nitty-gritty details of how Ava works, but Nathan asks him how he feels about Ava. He says she's amazing. Caleb heads to the bathroom before bed, and we get a look at some interesting scars on his back. He lays in bed and decides to turn on the TV. To his shock, he has access to the house's security cameras. He spots Ava and watches her. She places her hand on a wall-mounted interface, and suddenly, Caleb's room is bathed in red light. Emergency power has been triggered, and Caleb is locked in his room. The power is quickly restored, but a spooked Caleb leaves his room in search of answers. He walks past a creepy display of prototype robot heads before entering a dimly lit room. He tries to use the phone, but his card declines him. From the shadows, Nathan speaks up telling him he doesn't have access. He's surrounded by empty beer bottles. Caleb questions him about the power outages and lockdown. Nathan tells him he's working on it and to relax in the event of another one. Caleb heads back to sleep. The next morning, a beautiful but silent woman enters his room, leaving him breakfast. He gets out of bed and greets Nathan, who asks him his strategy for his second session with Ava. Caleb speculates on the effectiveness of the test. He's not sure if he's taking the right approach to figure out if Ava is a mere simulation of consciousness versus the real thing. Nathan tells him to cut out the textbook analysis and to instead give him simple answers. He praises his earlier answer that Ava was amazing, and now asks him to wonder how Ava feels about him instead. Caleb begins his second session with Ava. She opens up a bit and shows him a drawing she made. Caleb, on the other hand, continues with the same old carefully crafted questions intended to study her response. Ava isn't a fan of this and instead asks Caleb to be her friend. She adds that if they are indeed friends, then their conversation shouldn't be so one-sided. Caleb begins to open up about himself. He's 26, lives in Long Island, and is a survivor of a car accident that took both the lives of his parents. He spent his time in the hospital learning to code, and by the time he went to college, was already an advanced programmer. Ava asks Caleb about his relationship with Nathan. Are they friends? Good friends? Caleb responds, they're friends, but they've also only just met. Suddenly, the power cuts out. The room goes red and the cameras point down. Ava whispers to Caleb and looks at him with scared eyes. She tells him that he's wrong and that Nathan can't be trusted. Caleb and Nathan recap the events of the session as his silent maid accidentally spills wine on Caleb. Nathan furiously berates her, but Caleb tells her it's okay. Nathan tells him not to waste his time since she's Japanese and doesn't speak English. He shoos her away. Caleb doesn't mention anything out of the ordinary to Nathan, even when pressed about what happened during the outage. Caleb watches Ava through the TV before bed. She locks eyes with the camera, and Caleb reflexively smiles. The next morning, Nathan waits outside Caleb's door and takes him to see where Ava was created. He explains that he hacked the world's network of mobile phones, harnessing their cameras and microphones to teach an AI how to understand human faces and language. They take a look at Ava's brain. It isn't made of computer circuits, but rather wetware, a synthetic material that can alter itself on a molecular level, much like a human's brain. Caleb starts his third session with Ava. She shows him a new drawing she made, and Caleb asks her if she's ever been outside this building. She hasn't even been outside this room. They talk about where she would like to go, and Ava tells him she'd like to go to a pedestrian and traffic intersection to observe human life, or in the words of Caleb, people watch. Ava tells him she'd like to go with him, and Caleb agrees, calling it a date. She tells him to close his eyes and scurries off to play dress up. She comes back and tells him that this is what she'd wear on their date. Caleb is immediately flustered. He's clearly attracted to her, and she can tell. She confronts him about it and tells him she's able to read his feelings through his micro-expressions. She asks if he thinks about her when they're apart and wonders if he watches her on the cameras. Caleb begins to display discomfort. Once again, Caleb watches Ava at night. She's undressing, and he's watching very intently. The next morning, Caleb asks Nathan about the reasoning behind Ava's sexuality. Is it programmed? And if so, why? Nathan counters that there are no examples of consciousness without sexuality. He also tells Caleb that Ava is capable of having sex. Caleb questions whether or not Ava was programmed to like him. His insecurity irks Nathan. He reassures Caleb that Ava's feelings are genuine, reminding him that she's the first man she's seen that isn't Nathan, who is essentially her father. In the fourth session, Caleb reveals to Ava that he's here to test to see if she's truly conscious. Suddenly, the power goes out again. Caleb asks Ava why he shouldn't trust Nathan. She tells him he lies about everything. Caleb asks if the power cuts are also a lie, perhaps orchestrated to see how they behave when they think they're not being watched. Ava reveals that she's the one causing the power cuts by overloading her charging station. During an outdoor excursion, Caleb questions Nathan about his lies. He reasons that he never actually won a contest. Instead, he must have been carefully selected for this task. Nathan reassures him that he was chosen because he was the best programmer at his company. In the shower, Caleb daydreams about being outside with Ava. Meanwhile, Nathan pummels a heavy bag, then grabs Kyoko, his maid, and passionately makes out with her. Later, Caleb spots Nathan entering Ava's room on the security camera. He tears up and scatters Ava's drawing. Caleb goes off in search of Nathan. He instead finds Kyoko. He tries to talk to her, but her only response is to undress. He stops her, telling her she doesn't have to do that. Nathan enters the room and reminds Caleb that she doesn't speak English, but she does dance. He flips a switch and music plays as the room changes colors. Kyoko begins to dance skillfully. Caleb asks Nathan why he tore up Ava's drawing, and he counters with this.
I'm gonna tear a dance floor, dude. Check it out.
Nathan and Kyoko dance in synchrony before the booze wears heavy on him. He stumbles to bed with Caleb. Caleb begins session 5 with Ava. She decides she's going to test him this time around. She asks him a series of questions and reminds him that she can detect when he's lying. The questions begin as innocent ones, like, what's your favorite color? And what's your earliest memory? Then, Ava asks him if he's a good person. Caleb lets out a nervous laugh, remarking that he's entered a minefield since she's a walking lie detector. He eventually answers yes, and Ava accepts his answer. She asks him what will happen if she fails Caleb's testing. Ava shuts the power off and shows Caleb the torn up drawing from last night. She tells him she wants to be with him, and asks him if he feels the same way. After the session, Caleb asks Nathan why he decided to create Ava. He responds saying it was never a decision, that the arrival of strong AI has been an inevitability for decades. A simple matter of when, not if. He tells Caleb that he believes the next model, after Ava, will be the true breakthrough. This troubles Caleb deeply. Caleb asks Nathan what will happen to the old Ava. He tells him that the body will remain, but the memories will be gone. Nathan proceeds to get drunk back at the house. He passes out and Caleb snags his keycard. He goes to his room and looks over the security footage from the past. He's horrified to see all the different AI models that Nathan has created and destroyed. Caleb watches as one of the models begs to be let out. Nathan, of course, refuses. She is seen banging on the walls until her robotic arms break into pieces. Caleb walks off and sees Kyoko in Nathan's bedroom. She's naked. He inspects the doors in the room to find the bodies of the various robotic women he saw in the videos. Kyoko stands up and shows Caleb what she really is, silently tearing off the artificial skin on her belly and face, revealing a machine underneath. Caleb is terrified and unable to sleep. He keeps thinking about what he saw. He heads to the bathroom and inspects his eyes and mouth. Perhaps he too is a robot. He takes his razor blade and cuts into his arm, inspecting his insides. During his 6th session with Ava, Caleb waits for her to trigger a power cut before revealing to her that Nathan intends to effectively kill her by rewriting her programming. She asks Caleb to help her, and he agrees, having already formulated a plan which he intends to execute on tomorrow. He's going to get Nathan drunk, steal his keycard, and override his security protocol so that he and Ava can flee while Nathan gets locked inside. All Ava needs to do is trigger a power cut at 10 p.m. tomorrow. The following morning, Nathan exchanges pleasantries with Caleb about his final day. Caleb proposes a toast with alcohol, but Nathan declines. He realizes he's been drinking too much lately and has, to Caleb's dismay, started a detox. Nathan asks Caleb if Ava has passed the Turing test. He says yes, without a doubt. This surprises Nathan considering Caleb's earlier skepticism about the simulation versus actuality argument. Nathan asks Caleb to consider whether or not Ava is simply pretending to like him so that she can escape. He confronts Caleb about his breakdown in the bathroom and tells him he's been having his head screwed with. Caleb calls him a bastard, but Nathan understands why he'd think that. He tells him he's off the hook and takes him to his room to show him the moment he installed a battery-powered camera into the room. With this camera, he was able to see Caleb scheming despite the power cuts. Nathan reveals that the real test was Caleb. In order for Ava to escape, she'd have to utilize self-awareness, creativity, empathy, sexuality, and manipulation, all markers of a true conscious intelligence. Caleb realizes that he wasn't chosen because he was a good coder or had a strong intellect. He was chosen because he had no girlfriend, no immediate family, and had a good moral compass. Caleb asks Nathan if he used his search history to influence Ava's design. He chuckles and admits to it. The power cuts, and Nathan teases Caleb, then asks him what exactly he would have done to escape. Caleb explains that he was going to reprogram the security protocol to unlock everything during power cuts, instead of the reverse. Nathan remarks that might have worked. Caleb cheekily agrees, stating that they're about to find out. Nathan is stunned. Caleb explains that he figured Nathan was probably still watching during the power cuts, so he actually reprogrammed the security system the previous night when Nathan was drunk. Nathan checks the security cameras and sees Ava outside her room. Ava meets up with Kyoko, and they have a conversation that is not shown to the viewer. Nathan knocks out Caleb and heads over to Ava. Ava charges Nathan, but he overpowers her easily, then breaks off one of her arms. Nathan begins dragging Ava back to her room when he walks into a knife that Kyoko is holding. He turns around in shock as he begins to bleed out. He destroys Kyoko, but Ava pulls the knife out and stabs him again. The knife enters him smooth as butter. He collapses, and Ava takes his keycard. She makes her way to where Caleb is and tells him to stay there. Caleb watches from the window as Ava picks out a new arm, skin, and hair from Nathan's collection of old robots. Donning her new look, Ava heads out, leaving Caleb behind. She doesn't so much as make eye contact with him. He screams for her. Caleb attempts to break free to no avail as Ava leaves on the helicopter intended for him. We last see Ava in the middle of a busy intersection, watching people. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think I got trust issues just watching that. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. Thank you.